Ariba grew up believing that love was meant to be gentle. From a young age, she watched the women around her give endlessly. Mothers who woke before dawn, sisters who learned to stay quiet, and wives who measured their worth by how much they could endure. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, Ariba absorbed the idea that love meant sacrifice, and marriage was the highest form of it. She was not foolish, nor was she naive. She was hopeful. She believed that if two people chose each other, truly chose each other, then kindness would follow naturally. When the proposal came, wrapped in promises of forever, she said yes with a heart full of dreams she didn't yet have words for. The wedding day felt like a beginning carved out of light. The house was filled with laughter, music, and blessings whispered into her hair as elders kissed her forehead. Everyone told her she was lucky. Her husband stood beside her, confident and calm, and when he looked at her, she believed she was safe. In that moment, marriage felt like a shelter from every storm life could bring. The early days were sweet in small ways. Shared meals, quiet mornings, polite conversations. Ariba learned the rhythms of her new home, the sound of footsteps in the hallway, the exact time tea was expected, the way silence settled at night. She adjusted herself gently, the way water reshapes to the container it's poured into. She tried to be everything she was taught a good wife should be. She listened more than she spoke. She apologized even when she didn't understand what she had done wrong. She believed patience would be rewarded, that love would deepen with time. But sometimes, late at night, when the house finally slept, Ariba would lie awake and wonder why happiness felt so quiet. Why joy felt like something she was always waiting for, rather than living. She pushed those thoughts away, reminding herself that every beginning needs time. Marriage, she told herself, was not a fairy tale, it was a responsibility. And she was ready to carry it. Unaware, still, that some dreams don't break all at once. They fade slowly, day by day, until one day you wake up and realize you've been holding on to something that no longer exists. The change did not come suddenly. It never does. It arrived quietly, almost politely, the way shadows stretch across a room without anyone noticing. At first, Ariba blamed herself. She told herself this was what adjustment looked like, what real marriage demanded. Her husband began coming home later than before. Conversations grew shorter, answers sharper. Where there had once been neutral silence, there was now a weight, an unspoken tension that made Ariba careful with every word she chose. She started thinking twice before speaking, then 3 times, until silence felt safer. Small things began to hurt more than they should have. A forgotten greeting. A meal eaten without thanks. A sigh that carried disappointment but no explanation. Ariba would replay moments in her mind, trying to understand where she had gone wrong. She searched for mistakes the way one searches for lost keys. Desperate, blaming herself for not being careful enough. She tried harder. She woke earlier, slept later. She softened her voice, lowered her expectations, and smiled even when her chest felt heavy. She believed effort could fix distance. She believed love was something you earned by giving more of yourself. But something inside her slowly started to shrink. The laughter she once carried easily now felt out of place. Her opinions remained unspoken. Her dreams stayed folded away, like clothes saved for a season that never arrived. At night, lying beside a man who felt more like a stranger than a partner, Ariba stared at the ceiling and wondered when companionship had turned into loneliness. She missed being seen. She missed feeling chosen. Yet every morning, she woke up and tried again. Because admitting something was wrong felt scarier than enduring it. Because she still believed that patience could heal everything. She did not realize then that quiet changes are often the most dangerous ones. They don't announce themselves. They simply rewrite your life, slowly, until you no longer recognize the person you've become. Blame entered Ariba's life so quietly that at first, she didn't recognize it for what it was. It hid itself in casual remarks, half-jokes, and disappointed looks. If something went wrong, it somehow traced its way back to her. If something felt off, she was expected to fix it, without ever being told what was broken. Her husband's tone changed when he spoke to her. There was impatience where there used to be calm, irritation where there had once been indifference. Questions sounded like accusations. Silence felt like punishment. Ariba found herself constantly apologizing, often without knowing why. Slowly, the blame spread beyond the walls of their room. Family gatherings became uncomfortable. Conversations stopped when she entered. Eyes followed her movements, measuring, judging. If her husband was unhappy, people assumed she was the reason. No one asked her side of the story. No one noticed how quiet she had become. She began to doubt herself. Maybe she really was the problem. Maybe she was too sensitive, too emotional, too demanding. She replayed arguments in her head late into the night, rewriting her words, wishing she had been softer, quieter, easier to love. Isolation wrapped itself around her like a second skin. She stopped sharing her feelings, stopped reaching out. Even among people, she felt invisible. The loneliness of being alone was painful, but the loneliness of being misunderstood was unbearable. At times, she wanted to scream, to explain, to be heard. But every time she tried, her words were dismissed or turned against her. Silence became her defense. If she said nothing, she couldn't say the wrong thing. Inside, Ariba was fading. The woman who once believed in love now questioned her own worth. Still, she held on, not to happiness, but to survival. Because when blame surrounds you from every direction, you learn to endure rather than escape. She did not know then that isolation is not an accident. It is often the result of a slow, deliberate erosion, one that convinces you that you deserve to be alone. The word divorce did not arrive with shouting or chaos. It was spoken calmly, almost casually, as if it were a solution to a minor inconvenience. Ariba remembers the moment clearly, not because it was loud, but because it was quiet in a way that made her chest ache. Her husband sat across from her, distant and resolved. There was no hesitation in his voice, no softness in his eyes. He spoke about endings as if they were paperwork, about separation as if it were relief. Ariba listened, frozen, trying to understand how a life built on years could be reduced to a single sentence. She wanted to ask questions. She wanted to remind him of promises, of shared mornings and nights spent planning a future. But her throat felt tight, and her words refused to come. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this decision had been made long before it was spoken aloud. The days that followed blurred together. Meetings with lawyers. Papers filled with unfamiliar language. Signatures demanded where explanations were never offered. Ariba moved through it all like a shadow, present but unseen. Each form felt like another piece of her life being quietly erased. In court, she stood smaller than she ever had before. Her husband spoke confidently, listing claims and demands. The house. The money. The stability she had helped build but never owned in name. Ariba said little. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she was tired of proving her worth to people who had already decided it for her. When the judgment came, it felt final and cold. He walked away with everything that could be counted. What no one noticed was what he also took: years of her silence, her emotional labor, her patience. All of it packed neatly into a victory that looked impressive from the outside. As Ariba stepped out of the courtroom, the air felt strangely lighter. She had lost almost everything, yet something heavy had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in years, the future was uncertain, but it was hers. She did not cry that day. The tears would come later, in private. What remained in that moment was a quiet realization. The marriage was over, but she was still standing. When it was over, truly over, Ariba found herself standing at the edge of a life she no longer recognized. There was no dramatic exit, no final argument, just a quiet walk away from everything she once called home. What she carried with her could fit into a single small bag. What she left behind could not be measured. The room she moved into was unfamiliar and bare. The walls held no memories, no laughter, no arguments, only silence. At night, that silence felt louder than anything she had known before. It pressed against her chest, reminding her of everything she had lost. And yet, beneath the ache, there was something else: space. Room to breathe. The first few days were the hardest. She woke up reaching for routines that no longer existed. No one to cook for, no one to wait for, no one to please. The absence felt cruel. She questioned herself relentlessly. Was this freedom, or was it just another kind of loneliness? She cried when no one was watching. sometimes for hours, sometimes for reasons she could not name. Grief does not follow logic, it arrives in waves, pulling you under just when you think you are learning to float. Ariba let herself feel it all, because pretending to be strong had already cost her too much. Slowly, something unexpected happened. The fear began to loosen its grip. She realized that even with nothing, she was surviving. The world had not ended. She was still waking up, still breathing, still here. There was a strange power in that realization. She had lost the house, the money, the title of a wife, but she had kept her ability to begin again. For the first time in years, her choices belonged to her alone. That night, as she lay down to sleep, the room still felt empty, but her heart felt lighter. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew one thing with certainty: she was no longer trapped. Being left with nothing, she discovered, was not the same as being left with no future. Starting over did not feel brave. It felt terrifying. Ariba woke up each morning with a knot in her stomach, unsure of what the day would demand from her. There was no roadmap for rebuilding a life after it had been dismantled so completely. There was only the quiet decision to keep going. Her first job was small and modest, nothing like the life she had once imagined for herself. The pay was low, the hours long, and the work exhausting. But it was hers. Every coin she earned carried a strange kind of dignity, proof that she could stand on her own feet. People looked at her differently now. Some with pity, some with curiosity, some with judgment disguised as concern. She learned quickly that independence often makes others uncomfortable, especially when they expected her to break. Ariba let them think what they wanted. She was too busy learning how to survive. There were days she doubted herself deeply. Days when the past crept in, whispering that she was not enough, that she had failed. On those days, she reminded herself of how far she had already come. She had survived what once felt unbearable. Slowly, routine began to form. Early mornings, long commutes, tired evenings. And within that routine, something steady grew: confidence. Not loud or dramatic, but quiet and unshakable. She started making small choices just for herself. What to eat, how to spend her evenings, when to rest. These choices, once taken for granted, felt revolutionary. For the first time, her life was not shaped by someone else's expectations. Ariba realized that strength is not always visible. Sometimes it looks like showing up every day, even when no one is watching. Sometimes it looks like choosing yourself, again and again, despite fear. This was not the life she had planned. But it was honest. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, it was becoming hers. For a long time, Ariba believed she had lost. The house, the money, the years invested in a marriage that ended without mercy, all of it felt like proof that she had been defeated. Society reinforced that belief. People measured loss in visible things, and by that standard, she had walked away empty-handed. But healing has a way of sharpening perspective. As the noise of survival slowly faded, Ariba began to see the truth more clearly. What her husband had taken was not wealth or property. He had taken her exhaustion, her silence, the parts of her that bent until they almost broke. He had taken the version of her that apologized for existing. The woman who swallowed her needs, her voice, her pain, believing love required disappearance. He took years of emotional labor she was never thanked for. Nights spent waiting. Days spent adjusting. All of it went with him. And suddenly, Ariba understood something powerful. Those things were never assets. They were weights. What remained with her was lighter but far more valuable. Her ability to think freely. To breathe without fear. To make decisions without asking permission. She had kept her integrity, her resilience, and the quiet wisdom earned through suffering. There was no anger in this realization, only clarity. She no longer wished for revenge or recognition. She simply saw the balance clearly now. He had taken everything that drained her. She had kept everything that could grow. That understanding shifted something deep inside her. The past no longer defined her as a victim. It became a lesson, painful, yes, but transformative. She was not starting from nothing. She was starting from experience. In losing what she thought mattered, Ariba gained something far greater, herself. Self-love did not arrive like a sudden revelation. It did not announce itself with confidence or pride. It came quietly, in small moments that Ariba almost missed at first. A morning when she looked in the mirror and did not criticize herself. An evening when she chose rest over guilt. A decision made without fear of disappointing anyone. For years, she had been taught that loving herself was selfish. That a good woman put herself last. Undoing those beliefs was harder than enduring pain had ever been. Some days, she caught herself apologizing out of habit, shrinking without reason, doubting choices that harmed no one but empowered her. She began gently correcting herself. Replacing harsh inner words with kinder ones. Allowing herself space to feel joy without earning it through suffering. She learned that her worth was not tied to how much she could give or endure. Her silence changed meaning. It was no longer fear or submission, it became peace. She no longer felt the need to explain herself to people who were committed to misunderstanding her. Boundaries, once unfamiliar, became acts of self-respect. Ariba started doing things simply because they made her feel alive. Walking alone in the evening. Reading before sleep. Sitting with her thoughts without running from them. These moments stitched her back together in ways no one else ever had. There were still scars. Healing does not erase them. But the scars no longer hurt, they reminded her of survival. Of growth. Of how far she had come. For the first time, Ariba felt whole without belonging to anyone else. She did not need to be chosen anymore. She had chosen herself. And in that choice, she found a peace deeper than love she had once begged for. Time has a quiet way of settling accounts. It does not argue or accuse, it simply reveals. Years passed, and life moved forward for everyone, including the man Ariba once called her husband. At first, he felt victorious. He had kept what society values most: property, money, control. From the outside, his life looked intact. But slowly, the spaces Ariba once filled began to echo. The house was quiet in a way that felt empty rather than peaceful. There was no one to soften the hard days, no one to listen without judgment. He began to notice the absence in small, unsettling ways. Meals felt tasteless. Success felt lonely. Problems had no gentle place to land. The emotional labor Ariba once carried so effortlessly was gone, and with it, the comfort he had taken for granted. Regret did not arrive dramatically. It crept in during ordinary moments, when he realized no one waited for him, no one cared enough to ask how his day had been. He finally understood that what he lost was not replaceable. Meanwhile, Ariba's life continued to grow quietly. She did not chase validation or revenge. She focused on stability, peace, and becoming someone she respected. Her strength did not need witnesses. When news of Ariba reached him, her independence, her calm, her dignity, it unsettled him more than anger ever could. She had rebuilt herself without him. She no longer needed what he had once withheld. Time showed the truth clearly. He had taken what could be counted, but lost what could not be replaced. And Ariba, once seen as the weaker one, had become whole. Some realizations come too late to change the past, but just in time to reveal who truly won. Peace did not arrive as a reward. It arrived as a consequence of everything Ariba had endured, learned, and released. By the time she reached this chapter of her life, she was no longer chasing happiness the way she once had. She was protecting calm. Her nights were different now. She slept without fear, without rehearsing conversations in her mind, without bracing herself for disappointment. The quiet around her no longer felt heavy, it felt kind. Silence had become a friend, not a punishment. Her life was not perfect, but it was honest. She worked, she rested, she laughed when she felt like it. She surrounded herself with people who respected her boundaries, and she walked away from places that demanded she shrink. Peace, she learned, required courage. Sometimes, memories surfaced. Not with pain, but with distance. She could look at her past without losing herself in it. The woman she once was, the one who endured, waited, and blamed herself, no longer defined her. That woman had carried her through darkness, and for that, Ariba felt gratitude, not shame. At night, as she lay down to sleep, there was no bitterness in her heart. No need to prove anything. She had nothing left to reclaim from anyone. Everything that truly mattered was already with her. She understood now that winning was never about what she gained after the divorce. It was about what she no longer tolerated. About choosing dignity over attachment, peace over chaos, self-respect over fear. Ariba closed her eyes with a steady heart. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, but she trusted herself to face them. That trust, earned, tested, and unbreakable, was her greatest achievement. And so, she slept peacefully. Not because life was easy, but because she was finally free. Crescent moon final moral, bedtime lesson sometimes. The greatest victory is not getting everything back, but realizing you never needed what was taken from you in the first place.